It's hard to imagine that a being created in perfection could become the personification of evil. How is that possible? If God created all things good, how could evil have emerged? It seems contradictory, doesn't it? But perhaps the answer isn't where we usually look. What if evil is something that emerges from choices, not creations? Have you ever stopped to think that the true power given to us is free will? The ability to choose between following the light or yielding to the shadows. Satan had that choice, and we, every day, have it too. Since the dawn of time, evil has sparked curiosity and unrest in the minds most eager to understand the origin of everything. Satan's rebellion against God is at the center of this story. Created as a perfect angel, his downfall began with a single feeling many underestimate: pride. Have you ever noticed how that same pride can make us think we deserve more than what we have? Satan's story reminds us that when we let ego lead, we open doors to disastrous consequences. Satan, once an angel full of light, rebelled because he desired something greater, God's throne. Can you imagine that? A being created to serve, wanting to become the creator. What can we learn from this situation? All of us, at some point, face the desire for more power, more control. It's at that moment that we often forget that true power lies not in ruling, but in serving. It's interesting to reflect on how pride can change the course of someone's life, just as it did with Satan. This rebellion unleashed a true spiritual conflict, a battle that is still reflected in our everyday lives. Wars, disputes, power struggles, all can be seen as echoes of this original rebellion. How do we avoid falling into this trap? By practicing humility, remembering that the greatest power one can have is control over oneself and one's desires. Just as Satan's fall teaches us, excessive pride can be the root of many problems we face in the world. Before his fall, Satan held a high position in heaven, being a cherub, a high-ranking angel. Imagine the splendor of his existence, a figure of beauty and power. The position of a cherub, which gave him direct access to God's glory, shows how important he was. But, as often happens in life, what we have isn't always enough. And it was this dissatisfaction that led to his ruin. How many times do we desire more, even when we're in privileged positions? Satan's quest for power beyond what was given to him was the beginning of his destruction. He didn't just want to be a glorious creation. He wanted to be like the Creator. It's not hard to see this attitude reflected in the world, where people desire to exceed limits in pursuit of status or recognition. There's an important lesson here. What we want isn't always what we need. Maybe, in our daily lives, learning to value what we have can protect us from chasing after something that doesn't belong to us. This excessive ambition of Satan is a clear example of the danger of wanting to climb too high. And the price of his pursuit of power was steep. He lost everything he had, including his prestigious position. Just like him, we often find ourselves with choices that make us question our limits. How far are we willing to risk our achievements for momentary desires? It's worth thinking about every time we aspire for something beyond our means. Want to dive deeper into topics like this? Check out our exclusive ebook in the comments. It offers detailed analysis and spiritual reflections that complement this video. When Satan decided to rebel against God, he wasn't alone. A third of the angels followed him, falling into disgrace along with him. It's impressive to think that beings so powerful, created to glorify God, were led by such a dangerous ambition. This story shows us how the influences around us can divert us from our purposes. How many times, by following the crowd, do we find ourselves in situations we never imagined? The fall of these angels warns us of the power of bad company. These fallen angels became allies of Satan, transforming into beings that fight against good. It's curious how the choice of one individual can affect so many others. In our day-to-day lives, this is reflected in small acts. How we allow ourselves to be influenced by those around us. Sometimes, it only takes one misguided leader to drag several souls along. That's why it's essential to wisely choose whom we follow. After all, the consequences can be deep and long-lasting, just as they were for these angels. This event was a turning point in the spiritual realm, creating an invisible war between good and evil that still endures. Just as these angels chose the wrong path, we too have choices to make every day. Are we following the path that brings us closer to the truth, or are we letting ourselves be led by influences that can destroy us? Reflecting on this question can help us make more conscious and responsible decisions. The scriptures offer us a detailed glimpse of Satan's fall. Passages like Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14 speak of his origin as a beautiful and perfect being, until the moment pride took hold of his heart. These descriptions aren't just ancient stories, but timeless lessons about how the pursuit of power can lead us astray. Just as Satan desired to be like God, today many still seek a status that doesn't belong to them, ignoring the consequences. These biblical accounts reveal an important truth. Satan, even in all his initial glory, wasn't satisfied with his role. And how often does this happen with us? Dissatisfaction can lead us to want more than we really need. The wisdom here is in recognizing that there's a fine line between ambition and greed. Knowing how to recognize our limits and respecting what we've been given is an exercise in humility that can save us from many falls, both spiritual and personal. Satan's pride led him to desire to be equal to God, an ambition that, for him, ended in tragedy. In the same way, we are constantly warned to avoid the path of pride, which can blind us to what truly matters. Passages like these help us reflect on how small ambitions can grow and transform us, which is why we need to always be vigilant about our own intentions. The next time you feel the desire to be more, ask yourself, am I acting out of wisdom or pride? Jesus left us a powerful warning about pride, using Satan's fall as a clear example. He taught us that pride is the root of many evils, something that can distance us from our true mission. The interesting thing is that, if we look at our own lives, how many times has pride stopped us from admitting a mistake or asking for help? Pride isolates us. And just as Satan was expelled from heaven, we can find ourselves distanced from opportunities and people that truly matter. Pride is one of the most subtle traps, and Jesus shows us that humility is the way to avoid it. He teaches us to recognize our weaknesses, and that is freeing. In practice, this can mean something as simple as admitting when we're wrong or asking for advice when we're lost. How many times have you tried to solve something on your own out of sheer pride? It can be in personal life or even at work, but pride almost always prevents us from growing. Looking at Satan's story, we realize that pride doesn't lead anywhere positive. It makes us believe that we're self-sufficient, when in reality, true strength lies in recognizing that we need each other and, above all, God. Avoiding pride puts us on a path of humility and continuous learning. And as Jesus shows us, humility is the key to staying connected to what really matters. So after reflecting on the origin of evil and the impact of our choices, the question remains, how have you been using your free will? What's guiding your decisions? Perhaps it's time to evaluate whether pride, excessive ambition, or even the influences around you are distancing you from who you truly are. The great lesson we take from all this is that, just as Satan had the chance to choose, so do we. Are you willing to change the course of your story? If this content made you think differently, share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you realized you were on the wrong path? Don't forget to apply this knowledge in your daily life. And of course, subscribe to the channel to keep learning more about topics that really matter. Turn on notifications so you won't miss any content that could transform your life.